Now we're going to go download Belarc. We're going to interrogate the computer because I want to know the specs that are in here. It'll tell us what's installed, but it can't tell us, for example, like if there's an NVMe socket in there. For that, we'd have to either visually inspect or go in the BIOS and see if there's a setting for it, which I already know there is. But we're going to go ahead, install Belarc. It'll interrogate the computer. It'll interrogate the network. We'll let it go ahead and do all of its stuff. We're going to analyze the computer, so we're going to let it download its security definitions. And that takes just a couple of minutes. It'll download the security definitions. And this is a free application, free for personal use. I like to run this on every machine that I work on and save a copy of that file, because someone's always saying, you know my computer you worked on, blah, blah, blah. And no, I don't. I can't remember that stuff, so I can look up a computer by somebody's name, and I can look at the specs, and I can say, this is what's on your computer, this is what you got, this is what it's doing, or this is what you need, this is how big your hard drive is. The first time I ran Belarc, it was a little unnerving. It told me a whole lot of stuff that I didn't know. Okay, once we get Belarc installed, what I love about this, it tells all the good stuff. I'll know the processor, I'll know the operating system, I know the motherboard, I know the BIOS that I'm using right now. I know where the memory's sitting. I know the drives. And I can take a look at this. And we've got a Micron and we've got a second drive. And both of these are an option to be upgraded. But for a 256 gig M.2 SATA drive, that's a pretty good deal for the money. So I'll copy that. So we can go out and do a search. It also has the IP addresses for the computers on the network. That's another way to bring up the IP address instead of having to go look for it. Just let Belarc tell you where it's at. And again, this shows we have a Micron M.2. It has the 2 notches, so we know it's a SATA drive. If it had a single notch, it'd be an NVMe drive. But what's important to note, this computer will support an NVMe drive. It's not been neutered in any way. There's a setting in the BIOS. We'll go back and I'll show you. Let's see. You can see it's got 2 notches. This is one at Newegg. The 2280 refers to the length. And we can also take a look at this other drive. So we can upgrade the M.2 SATA drive to an M.2 NVMe. We can also upgrade this second drive, which is a spinning drive, to either a faster spinning drive, which is one option, which would take more battery, or we could upgrade it to an SSD and conserve that battery. So this tells us we have a Seagate. I believe that's a Seagate 5600 RPM drive. As it works with the machine with the other drive, performance is okay. It's a SATA drive. It's a 1 terabyte, but that would be something. If we upgraded the drive, we're looking at about $68 to a 7200 RPM drive. If we upgrade it to a SSD, which would greatly enhance performance, we're looking at about $168. And then, of course, the NVMe drive, about $150 for a 512 or $300 for a 1 terabyte. Okay, so we're looking at ASUS Republic of Gamers. This is an i7. That's important to note. That says, not a 5600 RPM, but a 5400 RPM. So we have a 1 terabyte, 5400 RPM SATA 3 hard drive and a 256 gig M.2 SATA solid state drive. Great performance, but it also can be upgraded. And then that 16 gigs of RAM, there's 1 stick. Now Belarc says there's 4 slots, but if we go to Crucial and interrogate the machine, the machine will then show at Crucial that there's only 2 slots. So we could put another 16 gig stick in here and make this 32 gigs, which is pretty incredible. And the mouse that's included is a Gladius 2 gaming mouse. I like that mouse. I'm still using the old Microsoft mice that I had from 1999. I haven't found anything I like better until this. Those were 4-button mice. And this is actually a 5-button mouse with some added features to it. So again, we've got an 8750 processor, which is a 6-core, 16 gigs of memory. And we've got 2 drives. Now, since we're on the subject of 2 drives, I'm going to show you where to change the default storage location as it relates to the operating system. The application, like your browser, also has a default location. It defaults to whatever the operating system says, but that too can be overridden. So we're going to go Windows flag I for Windows settings. We're going to click on System. We'll go down here to Storage. We click on Storage. Now it shows here the C drive and the D drive. Storage sense is off. And we're going to right here where it says More Storage Settings. Change where new content is saved. Originally that's what you would see, but since Microsoft updates, they have a way of obscuring things. So now there's an extra layer to get to it. And that's where you would change it. Change where new content is saved. New apps, new documents, new music, new photos, movies, maps, For example, if I want to save music to the D drive, then I just say the D drive. If I want to save documents, photos, apps, this is where it would change. But you also have an override within the browser, depending on which browser you're using. I want to show you some of the applications from the Start menu. I'm going to click on Start. We're going to go to ASUS. Now we've got ASUS as a folder, ASUS Hello. That's the application that we set up where we create the account once you're online, where you create your ASUS account, and it also ties and pairs at the same time with McAfee and sets that account up. The ASUS install, ASUS Live Update, and the Republic of Gaming Center. Okay, the ROG Gaming Center. I've been eager to get to this. That button is one way to get to that. I'm going to go back to the desktop, and I'm going to go to a camera, and I'm going to show you another way to get to that, which I think is kind of cool. That's what that button's for. So let's go to camera number 2, and a better view might be even camera number 3. And if you'll notice this button right here, this little button, you got 1, 2, 3, 4. Audio down, audio up, microphone mute, and this little button. When I press that button, the Gaming Center comes up. So we'll go back, and I'll go back over to that computer so you see the direct input, and that's what it looks like. That's the Gaming Center. Now this is kind of wild. It shows the CPU and the GPU. Now we've got the GL703, and if you'll notice up here in the upper left-hand corner, control the ROG Gaming Center from your mobile device. If you've got a smartphone like an Android or an iOS, you can download the app and control this, which is kind of wild. Log into it. It shows the Intel processor. It shows the Nvidia. Now, I'm going to get into some of this, and I want to do it from this standpoint. I'm going to come back and talk about the video in just a minute because this really, really matters and something you need to be aware of. Part of this is just the way the hardware is set up. Nothing we can do about it. So from here, we see what the CPU is doing, the GPU is doing. We can change the profiles. We've got extreme, standard, and we can see standard, extreme, and manual, so we can set this. I'll kick out of it. I just want to show you right quick. You've got gaming profiles. Again, we're not using this for gaming. We're using this for work. And the thing while we're here, I want to show you, if you notice at the bottom, the ROG Aura Core. That's one of the big deals with ASUS is this RO Sync lighting. The way your keyboard has that lighting where it looks like a rainbow color, this is where you set it, and this is where I changed it to red. The rainbow colors, to me, got a little bit to be too much. And it also does the same thing with the mouse. Now, as I mentioned before, if you unplug the mouse and plug it back into a different port, you'll get an error and the mouse won't sync. The only way it'll sync back up, it'll just sit there and spin with a rainbow color, the default. You have to reboot the computer. It'll come back to normal. Hope they'll fix that update soon. But I wanted to share this with you. So this is where I changed this. So when I click on the ROG Aura Core, give it a minute, and this pops up. And what I changed it to, it was rainbow, which I didn't care for. I changed it to static. What you'll see with this laptop when this thing starts to power down, for about 30 minutes after it goes to sleep, it'll look like it's breathing and it's pulsating. And it pulsates like a heartbeat. And it's kind of wicked cool. So if it's somebody else looking at your laptop and you're nearby and you want to, I don't know, be different, it's kind of interesting. I've enjoyed watching it. It's like it's got a life of its own, but I had to share that with you. And that's where you set it. So I'm going to kick out of this because I've already changed it, and also I can adjust the brightness. The brightness right now is at 33%. It affects not only the color you see that's a peripheral on the keyboard, but it also affects the color of the keys themselves. Now with this set like it is, the keys stay kind of white looking, and I prefer that. And I like the red at a glance. The red is easier to see in the dark. Also, you got fan overboost. Right now it's balanced. Game visual, I don't use that. Sonic Studio, their audio application. Now over here on the right hand side, to me this is important. The ROG key, which is that key on the top I showed you, that's a way to turn it off and on. The Windows key also you can turn off and on. And the touchpad. I need to be able to, there are times when I'm using a laptop, I need to be able to turn off that touchpad. For example, if I'm using a laptop and I need to reach up and hit that space bar like I'm using it for the video switch, I have to go across that touchpad and it might change one of the inputs or monkey something up. I need some way to turn that off. That's one way to turn it off. So when I'm using the mouse, I can reach up and hit that touch bar and I don't have to worry about my hand gliding across that pad. That's to me a really nice feature. Had to share that with you. So that's kind of what that application does. I'm going to close that out. And again, I can call it up from the menu or I can call it up from that button. And that's it, which is kind of cool. Now something else I want to show you, we're going to go in to the Windows settings, but we're going to get to it this way. We're going to go to, let me zoom in a little bit. We're going to right click. We're going to go to display settings. Let me back up before we even do that. Before we go to display settings, we're going to take a look. We have Intel graphics and we have Nvidia. Now it's important at the moment I show you this because we have Intel graphics and we have the Nvidia. Keep in mind your display is connected to the Intel. Your secondary display, because you have two, there should only be one video card. And I'll just say right now, this setting I'm about to tell you about, we need a way in the BIOS, which there is not one, to make this setting change, because you want to have that one display connected to that one video card. They pair up. Otherwise, you have to keep in mind, whenever you're looking at the display, whatever adapter is tied to it, that's what you see. So what I'm going to do is show you how to do a color match. But remember, the color match we're doing is to the display you see. That 1050 Ti, you cannot set the display to it. I'll show you the settings that everybody talks about. The only way we could change that display that's tied to that monitor is if there was a setting in the BIOS to switch it, or if you had a laptop that only had one display. Now, if we look at the specs on this, there's no mention of the Intel graphics, but the Intel graphics is what you're going to color match to. I'm going to show you. If we go to display settings, and let's scroll down here to advanced display settings. And if you'll notice under advanced display settings, I'll get this where you can see the whole thing, display information, and this is advanced display settings. Now we have one display, which is the laptop itself. And let me go over to camera so I can talk about this from that standpoint. I'll go to camera 3. Now if you look at this, we have this one display. This display is tied to the video card, which happens to be the Intel. This is the Intel 630. It would be nice if we could connect this to the Nvidia. We cannot. This display is tied to this. Now, this second display, which is coming out of HDMI, it says decimator. That's the converter we use to go into the switch. It too is also tied to the 630. There's no way to change the monitor, either internal or external, to use the other video card. The other video card can only be used to enhance an application. So we've got 1920 by 1080, and it shows the panel. It's 120 Hertz refresh rate. And if we were to plug this into a 4K display, we would get 4K 30 up on the screen. We've got HDMI, and if we plug into the mini display port, we could get 4K 60. But if I click on display properties, I'm only going to be able to make a change for the Intel graphics. And either one of these, display 1 or display 2, are tied to the Intel graphics. They are both tied to Intel graphics. So when I click on this, I get this property sheet up. Now I've already got this set, but I'm going to show you, we're going to color match. I have adapter, monitor, and color management. What I'm going to show you to go color management to get into this is the same color management you'd get into from the control panel, the old control panel, the regular Windows control panel. And this says the chip type, internal, Intel graphics 630. The only setting in the BIOS we can change is how much memory is allocated to that video adapter. So I'm going to click on color management, and I get this property sheet. By default, ASUS has already color matched this display to this video adapter, but it is not there. In other words, you don't see this, and it's not set by default. It should be. So what I'm going to do is show you how to find it, because only 3 things you color match: your display, your printer, and possibly your scanner. I can go to all profiles, but I'm going to go to advanced, and the default will probably say something like the sRGB IEC. So what we want to do, and again you can calibrate, but you don't need to because it's already been done for you. We're going to change system defaults. Now I have this and I can delete it. It doesn't actually delete the file from the hard drive. I've also made a copy of it because I found it, but it would delete it from this setting. So what I would do is click on add, and right here where the ICC profiles are, that's the default. And if you say plug in an external monitor, the external monitor might have an ICM file. But that is the ICM file for the ASUS GL703 GE for this display. So we would take that and we would say OK. And when we say OK, we have color matched. Let me emphasize that again. We are color matching that display, whatever display is tied to the Intel graphics. We are not color matching to the Nvidia. The Nvidia, I'm going to show you now the settings for it, but we cannot color match to it. Remember that. So let me zoom out of that. To me, that's a big deal. Cancel that, cancel that. Okay. Now we're going to right click on the desktop. I'll zoom in on that. The Intel graphics and the Nvidia. Here's where we set the Nvidia to do its magic. Now, the property sheet's going to come up. We'll go to Manage 3D Settings. And if you'll notice right here, it shows the preferred graphics processor, Auto Select. And it will tell us under Global Settings, if we scroll down, Description, reduce CPU usage by saving compiler shaders to a disk cache. Typical. Enabling the cache reduces stutter and improves load times. Disable the cache to save disk space. Well, disk space is not an issue. Shader cache is on, and it's auto select. But it's auto select according to whatever processor it thinks need to be used. If I wanted to select high performance, then I would say OK, and there will be a little button down here. Let me zoom back out. Where's the button? Right down here on the far right corner. It says Apply. Let me make that a little bit smaller so it's easier. I'll zoom back in on that. Now, if I said high performance and set apply, it'll set that. And it says CUDA GPUs all. Preferred graphics processor. If I go to program settings, I haven't saved anything yet. If I go to program settings, if you'll notice VLC, select the program to customize. See where it says integrated graphics number 2, select the preferred graphics processor for this program? I can't do a thing about that. I can't use VLC with that adapter. It's going to use what it wants, which will be the default adapter. I don't usually look at video through the browser. I usually use the media player, and you have to think about your media that you're playing. Like at Build or Buy, our big thing is we love our technology, but we also like our movies. Some of us capture movies, some of us rip movies, some of us download movies. But whatever we have, we normally use VLC. There are other media players for that. But I want to show you this. If you'll notice, we cannot tell VLC to use the other graphics adapter. We can, for example, tell Cortana, or we could tell Microsoft Edge to use either the integrated graphics or to use the high performance. And the default is to use the global setting high performance. So I'm just showing you this and telling you this, that this is one of the dirty little secrets with all laptops, because I'm going to go over to the HP Envy and show you the same thing. You'll see the exact same thing. It's got two adapters in there. But what you're color matching to is the integrated graphics. Your high performance Nvidia is on a per application basis. Now, if it did run all the time, it would take more battery, and it would also increase heat, and heat's an issue. So there's issues. I'm going to go over here now to set physics, and I didn't change any of that. Set physics configuration. Changes have been made, but must be applied. Would you like to apply these changes now? I'm going to say no. I'm keeping this in the default so I can show you what's going on. Now, if you notice, select a PhysX processor. PhysX is a function of the GeForce, but they are not physically connected. Both the laptop display and the decimator, to reiterate, which is the device that the HDMI is connected to so you can see the screen. Both of these devices from PhysX, which is a GeForce technology, is tied to the Intel graphics, auto select. I could change it to the 1050 Ti, and it's not going to change this. These are physically tied to this. In one sense, you want to say, what good is having a high-end video adapter? Well, that's a very good point. This has a 1050 Ti. According to Netflix, that's the minimum you want for watching 4K video. So if we were to flip this over to Netflix, and I'm not saying I'd watch Netflix on a laptop, I'd rather see it on a smart TV. But if I were to watch Netflix on my laptop, number one, I'd want to take the application and tie it to this. Number two is the browser that's being used. And according to the spec that's been set up between Netflix and Microsoft, you have to use the new Edge browser. So you go into this application, tell Edge browser to use the high-end chipset. It's going to take more processing power. It's going to create more heat. It's going to use more battery, so you want to keep it on power while you're doing that. So, there's things I don't like, and that's one of them, but that's no fault of the laptop. That's just the way it is. For example, I'm going to show you this other laptop. Let's go over to the HP Envy. I'm going to right-click. I'll zoom in. You're going to see the same thing. I've got Intel graphics, and I've got Nvidia. So I'm going to go to Display Settings. I'm going to scroll down to Display Settings, Advanced Display Settings, and if you'll notice, I have an Intel 620, and also it's connected to a decimator, which is the HDMI device we're hooked into, and it too is connected to the Intel graphics. If I were to color match this display, I'll check properties. I'm not going to, but if I were to color match this display, that's what I'd be color matching to. And again, it shows the monitor, so I'd go down here, we back out to Advanced, we'll go to Change System Defaults, and I would click Add. Now, I don't have a custom color profile in here to set this to, but if I were to set it, this is where I'd find it. The default is usually this sRGB. Canon has set several up in here because of the Canon printer, ICM and ICC files. So that would be the default. I would say, okay, add to advanced color profile, and then it would color match. And I'm color matching to the Intel graphics. If you'll notice, of all the stuff seen, it's the display, the default display, either one, Intel graphics. Zoom out of this. I'll close this. I didn't change anything. I'll close this. I'm going to right click. I'll go to the Nvidia control panel. Now this does not have as high end of a chip, but I've got the same issues. If I were to tell it to use the preferred processor, which would be the high performance Nvidia, if I go to program settings, Microsoft Cortana, use the global setting, auto select integrated, or if I said VLC, again, integrated graphics, I cannot change it. Some of the other applications I can, but my media player is going to use, and even if I go to global setting and tell it to use the high performance, it's going to use the low performance video. If I go to PhysX, I've got the same issue. Let me bring this down so I can get this in a window. So when I zoom in on it, we can see everything. Okay, we should be able to zoom in on that. And if you'll notice, PhysX, which is a function of the GeForce, this has an MX150. PhysX is a function of the GeForce, but the PhysX is tied to those two displays, the laptop and the decimator, that's the HDMI. And they are tied physically to the Intel 620 graphics. So if I were to color match, I'm color matching to the 620 graphics. If I want to use the GeForce, then I have to tell the applications specifically to use the GeForce. So if you're buying a laptop with high-end video, I think the thing to do is to look for, see if it has one video in it or if it's got two video. Let me zoom out of that. So what I'm going to do now is let's go back over and take a look at this at Costco. 17-inch display, 16 gigs of memory on 1 terabyte hard drive and a 256 gig SSD. There's a 4 gig GeForce GTX 1050 Ti in there, but there's also, as we flip over and take a look, there's also an Nvidia in here. So there's no mention of this Intel graphics in the description of the computer, which is Intel 630. And the selling point is the GTX 1050. I'm just saying. Wanted to let you know about it, FYI. So we're looking at ASUS ROG Strix GL703. I'll put a link up on this on YouTube so you can download the PDF file because it'll help you to have a better understanding of what's in there and how to go through some of these things. We may do another follow-up video on this laptop because, again, I think it's bang for the buck for what you get. There's a lot there for the money. I like the laptop. I like the layout. I've read some of the reviews. People have complained about the screen. I don't see it. They've complained about the keyboard. I don't see it. And I've seen some complain about the touchpad. And I don't see problems with the touchpad. I like this laptop. I think it's a good deal for the money. It's it's interesting. It's an inanimate object, but every laptop is different. And this laptop has personality. So I like it. The things I don't like, I've shown you. The things I do like, I've shown you. What I'd like to do now is I want to go into the BIOS and show you a couple of settings. I don't want to get lost up in it, but I will say for those that like to run the virtual machines, the settings are already there in the BIOS, so you can do that. Again, for us, this is a work laptop. What we need is a computer that we can run the video switch with, either the controller, which is pretty simple, or to run the graphics. So that may be a follow-up video we do behind the scenes where we use our new Blue effects, where we do our overlays and stuff in real time. That's what we're looking at this laptop for. But so far, I think it's fascinating. So what I want to do now is I want to take you into the BIOS. We're going to flip over to a different screen. Okay, let's go back over to the ASUS, and we're going to take that to a camera. I'm going to do an overhead shot of that right quick and show you, point something else out, because since we're getting ready to go into the BIOS, this is kind of relevant. There's actually about 3 different ways to get into the BIOS. Usually we're used to pressing either the escape key or delete key. The manual says specifically to press the F2 key when you reboot. That's one way to get in. Because this has a unified EFI BIOS, you can also hold down the Shift key. So once you bring the computer up, press and hold down the Shift key, and as it reboots, we'll go through a menu. Now, because we're going to lose HDMI input function, we're going to have to do this from a camera. Okay, I'm going to hold down this Shift key. Okay, power, restart. Now we will lose input. It'll blink. You can see a little bit of it since I'm standing in front of it. And we bring up the menu, and lo and behold, we still have the input. I didn't expect that. So you can see the input there, but you can also see Windows gave us control, and we're still in Windows. So I held down the Shift key to bring up this option because we rebooted. Remember, we have a unified EFI BIOS. And the purpose of this was we're going to go into the BIOS. So I'm going to go down here where it says Troubleshoot. We're going to look for Advanced Options. Now, we're going to go to Advanced Options, and right here, change settings in your PC's Unified EFI firmware. Now, we're going to lose output on this particular display, so we're going to have to take that back over to a camera, and I'm going to say Unified EFI firmware settings. I'll click enter. And then I'm going to say restart to change the BIOS. Now, I don't have to do anything but just wait. Okay, we lose input from the HDMI. The laptop will reboot. We'll go into the BIOS, and there it is. Now, let me see if I can get a little closer. I wish we had direct input from the HDMI, but we do not. But I think you'll be able to see what we're looking at. Okay, it shows the BIOS version, and the BIOS update occurred when Windows Update happened. Shows the Intel 8750, which is 6 cores. Shows the total memory 16 gigs. Shows the Intel graphics. When I click on that, shows the Intel graphics 630 number 1 and the Nvidia GeForce GTX 1050 number 2. There's no way that I can do anything to that. And it shows an asset tag with a serial number. Shows boot priority, the boot manager. Shows that it's booting from the Micron SATA drive. Shows the LCD. Shows the USB where the mouse is plugged in. Shows the storage, the Micron. I can see storage number 2, which is port 4, which is the other drive. Shows the CPU fan, around 1980 RPM. Shows CPU temperature, 33 degrees centigrade. Shows the primary battery, 100%. Password, user password. Okay, this is the simple stuff. Now, down here on the bottom right, I've got default, save, boot menu, advanced mode, and search. Search on FAQ. So what we're going to do, interesting, when I click or when I hover over that search on FAQ, if you have a smartphone, there's the code, search for more answers in the FAQ page. Wow, that's new. I'm going to click on advanced mode, F7, and this will change the BIOS. So now I've got main, advanced, boot, security, save, and exit. And there's nothing here, just pretty much to look at stuff under main. Shows the date. Advanced, wake on lid, open, enabled. All this stuff is enabled. The internal pointing device, it's another place it could be turned off. The Intel AES NI and the VTD, Intel virtualization, all three of those deal with virtual machines. The ASUS flash utility, smart settings like on the drive, network stack, USB, graphics, and SATA. Okay, the graphics configuration, here's what I want to show you. There's nothing here we can change. It says pre-allocated, 64 megs. There would have to be a setting in the BIOS to swap the display. And let me see if I can move that just a little bit. Now there's nothing there we can change. Pre-allocated is 64 megs. If there was a setting in the BIOS where we could change the default video adapter, this is where it would be, then we'd be able to color match to the 1050 Ti, but there's not. So I'm going to back out of this, and there's one other setting I want to show you. Under SATA configuration. Now, this says SATA mode AHCI, which is what we want, but I'm going to scroll down. Okay, I didn't scroll down far enough. If you'll notice here on the left-hand side, we looked at graphics configuration, SATA configuration. Right below SATA, this is what I was looking for, NVMe. Okay, if you'll take a look there on that camera, we've got the graphics configuration we looked at, the SATA configuration we looked at, which is AHCI. And if you notice, the last setting down there is NVMe configuration. If we had an NVMe drive, that's where it would be seen. So what that tells us, instead of having to physically look at the connector or contact the manufacturer, this computer has not been neutered. We can change out that SATA drive to an NVMe drive. And that right there is a big plus. That's one of my favorites, and I'm glad to see that, because that's something that's been missing in the HP Envy because there's so many different versions of it. So that's something I had to show you. So I think that's about all I've got to share with you right now with this laptop. I hope you enjoyed it. It's an amazing box. Again, this is the ASUS Republic of Gamers, the ASUS ROG Strix model GL703. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. I pray we used your time wisely, and we'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe. We look forward to seeing you next video. Remember, if you've got any questions, we'd like to hear from you. If you've got any comments, or if you'd like to see us do some other stuff that we haven't covered quite like you'd like, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching. We look forward to seeing you next video. Have a great day.